everybody. It's January still, so I can still say Happy New Year. I mean, that's just kind of really old when you say it, don't you think? It's Happy New Year. But I mean, yeah, we're almost into February. New Year is long gone in that process. But as we're here and thinking about it, we're here to talk about some goals today, how to keep them going. I know there is no way you could not have gone through January without the thought process of resolutions, of goals, of a whole bunch of that stuff. And so through that, I'm saying, let's find out a little bit more about it. But thinking through, what are your goals and how did you have to have them? And you're like, I ain't even set goals. I'm gonna be honest, I ain't set them. Well, it's okay because there's still time. There's nothing that says you have to do it in January, but it might be something just as simple as learning how to use Alexa versus Siri. This past week, for some of you that watch us and talk to us and all of that fun stuff, know that I have 3 girls and a boy in my house with my wife, and mornings can be interesting in such a way. And so one day last week, I was just calling, and they didn't, they weren't listening. By the time they left, then I get up here and it's just one of those mornings and you're frustrated. And I needed Alexa to set up something for me. But I called her Siri by name. And I kept saying, Siri, Siri, Siri. And I would get madder and louder and crazy. And then I thought she's broken. So I unplugged her, plugged her back in. Now I unplugged her today because she would come on in this process. But I just kept calling. And then I was like, oh, crap. Your name's Alexa, and she worked just fine. So maybe that's the goal that you set, that you just kind of figure out what that's going to do for you. Maybe it's the little things in life in that regard. But to kind of start talking through the process of today and setting 2022 goals, I will really tell you that the genesis of today really came by one of your chamber emails. The work that we do with chambers and sponsorships, we're getting a lot of your emails in our inboxes and seeing what you're doing. And I'm always looking. And I saw this chamber and I just got excited about it because I'll be honest, I wasn't really reading it. I was just kind of quickly scanning it and seeing was there anything I wanted to pull through. And so it's kind of one of those, I was reading but scrolling at the same time, and then I had to go back because I really thought this chamber was hosting kind of like a goal setting seminar in January. And I thought, what a great thing, the way it's kind of titled and phrased. And I just thought, oh, wow, what an answer to small businesses and all your members really, but really small businesses as they're starting this year. And, you've got W-9s, W-2s and 1099s to send out, and you got to make sure taxes are getting ready and all of these big things. But you need to have some goals. And so I really wanted to see what the chamber was doing. So as I looked at it, well, then I realized it wasn't as exciting as I thought it was, because it was honestly the chamber just putting a blurb in their newsletter about how goals were important. I'm not saying goals aren't important. Of course they are. But as you can imagine, most of the emails that you probably saw in January had something to do about setting resolutions or setting goals and the need for them. And some of them might have scratched the surface on what they needed to look like. But the way they had titled this, I really thought it was going to be some substantive program that was really going to help businesses really get through the year and kind of that funk of the first couple of weeks of January of doing goals, doing resolutions, and then not doing them. And so I was really kind of disappointed. And I then thought, well, that's probably a good idea for chambers. So many of you have reached out to us, to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce professional Facebook page, other chamber execs and peers, and, trying to think of new content to bring in this 2022 year. And as we have kind of gone through these last few years, God, can we say few years, with COVID and the changes that it has done to our small businesses, many of you have gotten innovative, but I think a lot of you have gotten to a point of how do we provide value content for our small businesses? How can we help them continue. Because sometimes the larger organization, the larger the business, the more resources they have and might not experience the bumps that small chambers do in the course of navigating business. And so I want to give that to you today. I want you to think about it. You're like, resolutions and goals. I mean, hello, we're at the end of January. Isn't that a little old? Quite frankly, I think it's more appropriate now than it would have been back in the first couple of weeks of January, because most everybody at least thinks about goals or thinks about resolutions, whether they, do anything with them or not. It crosses their mind. I thought about going to get on a treadmill and then I just ate another piece of carrot cake. So, I mean, at least I thought about it in that process. But how can you purposefully create content in February, maybe in the first quarter, maybe it's in April coming out of the first quarter, that your businesses will go, aha, that's something I need. That's something I need to look at. I need to have goals in my business. I need to keep going on. How can I do that? And then from there, as a chamber, create some content that you can then distribute to those members in such a way that they can find it valuable, whether or not it's a webinar. How many of us are zoomed out? And I say that doing that to you on a Facebook Live YouTube video. But whether it's coming together in a sit-down seminar for those of us that are open and doing business that way, is it just, in writing and in a toolkit that they can use? So many different opportunities. So wanted to kind of talk you through that process as an idea. But as we try to do here on TRC Talks, I also wanted to give you content with that idea, something that you can take and develop, something you might go, hello, I don't have time to develop anymore. Well, I wanted to give you a resource that you could access to then provide that. So as I was thinking about who to bring on, somebody crossed my mind, and then actually that very afternoon having a conversation with somebody, she came up in a conversation again. So I knew she was the person that we had to bring. So we are welcoming, not inviting, because we've already invited her. And here she is. We're welcoming to the show Libby Spears with Bravo CC. So good to have you. We have crossed each other's paths many times on this chamber conference circuit. And I have to tell y'all, probably the biggest thing that caught my attention when it came to Libby is, as you can imagine, at all the conferences we all sit in as chamber execs, and sometimes we're paying attention and sometimes we're not. But when a speaker throws a picture of Dolly Parton up on a screen, you stand up and pay attention. And I just knew that she was going to be somebody I enjoyed and all of that. Libby, thanks for coming. You absolutely specialize in communication and leaderships, and goal setting is part of that. And, as we get into that and really kind of see how you do that, I'd really like to ask you a first question that people are probably wondering and going, Bravo CC. Well,
what is that?
Wow, how does that work? So welcome and tell us all about it.
Well, thank you. Well, first, yes, we have a shared love for Dolly. So that was an easy connecting point between the two of us. I thought I was a big Dolly fan, but then I met you and I was like, okay, I don't even rank in the top million compared to you. But we do have that shared interest. Easy to make a new friend when you both love Dolly.
Absolutely.
But also a shared interest in the kind of conversation that we're going to have today. So to answer your initial question, Bravo CC is a communication and consulting company. We work with primarily organizations that are interested in developing their leaders. We work with leaders at every level. So whether it's emerging leaders, what we call established leaders, your managers and supervisors, or executive leaders, we have lots of different options to work with them to grow their leadership talent, to get stronger and feel more confident in their work. And this conversation is timely because it comes up a lot in January for many people. I think I heard you say you haven't set any goals yet for 2022.
Oh, no, I have. I was saying that some people might say, I just haven't set any yet. Actually, when I was saying that, it came out, I said, I think that's going to come across that I haven't, but I'm just going to keep going. So I guess that's the way it came across.
Well, so I'm a certified Clifton Strengths coach. So if anyone watching has taken a Strengths Finder, you're familiar with the concept. If not, it's worth a Google. But a lot of what I'm doing, whether it's coaching one-to-one, if I'm in a classroom working with a group of people, if I'm at the table with an executive team doing some consulting work, or on a stage talking about leadership, that's absolutely the foundation around pretty much everything that we do is built on that strengths foundation. And my process every January for what you might call goal setting really kind of begins there too.
Perfect. So, I mean, as chambers think through, okay, Jason just said offer this opportunity. I do my own goals. How do I start working with small businesses and those type of things? I think one of the things that we hear a lot about in January is, New Year's resolutions. Have you set your resolutions yet? And, there's that whole aspect to it. And then somehow goals start kind of setting on top of that there's this blurring between resolution and goals. How would you say they're related if they all are? What would be your answer to, is there a difference in a resolution and a goal?
I mean, not really. I think it's just a matter of verbiage. I think resolution is a bit of an antiquated term, so you don't hear it as much anymore. People tend to think that it's at the beginning of the year word, so you only use it in the month of January, whereas goal setting can happen throughout the year. I find just in coaching, particularly, especially working with a lot of high achievers, I'll ask at the beginning of the year, I'll say, what kind of goals are you setting for yourself? And interestingly, many of them will say, I don't set goals. And of course, that always requires a follow-up question. Tell me more. What is it about setting goals that you're not down for, that you don't like it? And what I hear from a lot of people is, I resist setting goals because if I don't meet that goal, then I feel like a failure. And I don't like that feeling. I don't want to know what that feels like to feel like a failure. So I just don't set goals. So we use a little bit of a different approach and different language for the start of the year. Instead of this idea of setting resolutions, which, I mean, we've all been around the block enough times. We know what the research says, it has like a 30 to 45 days, and then everybody kind of just goes back to the way they've always done things. So I take a little bit of different approach. I've been doing this for about 15 years now, this activity. And what I do instead and have my clients do is choose 3 words for the year. Okay. So 3 words that they want to represent the year ahead. And it's sort of built around the idea that I'm going to create a life that is happening for me instead of a life that happens to me.
Okay.
Right. And so to me, it's like a more powerful way to take control of your year, but it doesn't have some of the baggage that comes with let's set goals.
Yeah.
People don't like that. They don't want to do that. But when I say, okay, well, let's choose 3 words that sort of represent the kind of year that you want to have, I find people are more down for that kind of activity.
That you can then take to the next level in that particular aspect. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Staying with a thought process of, January 31st. So whether we set goals, resolutions, we created our words for the year, there's this sense of, okay, January's over with. Now we're, stepping into February and those type of things. What would, as you start thinking about it and helping people kind of work through this process to, let's say that nobody did anything in January, how does the mind start working to say, well, you can start setting those goals today, tomorrow?
Absolutely.
You might have some chamber people that set their own goals, but as we're thinking about small businesses and helping them, they might go, they didn't even do it. I mean, what's the point of doing it in February if they didn't do it in January? How do you get beyond that thought of a startup year to just kind of getting in and doing the work?
First of all, I have found historically a lot of people don't want to do that in January. January is its own kind of thing. It seems to me it's almost like a standalone month outside of the year because people are trying to slowly get back into the swing of things after having taken time off with work, and then they get back into work and it's really busy. And so I would make an argument that the start of February is a really nice time to do this. Because, right, it's like, okay, we lived through January, we survived, and now I'm going to wrap my head around the next 11 months. And what do I want to do with these 11 months? I think in chatting with you leading up to today, I had a coaching client in December say to me, January, I had so many big ideas. Like there were all these things that I was going to do. And he said, and now here I am in December, it's almost the end of the year. And I look back and I didn't do any of it. And so what do I do differently this year? Well, had he been coaching with me for an entire year, he would have gotten a lot of tools and resources to keep that momentum that often falls off in the first couple of months of the year. So I'll tell you a few things just to get us started. The starting place for me really is that whole concept of 3 words. And they need to be words that speak to you, get you energized, make you feel excited, and you get to bring the meaning to the word. So whatever word it is that you choose, you get to decide what that means for you. I love alliteration. I love anything that rhymes. So I always try to be a little bit clever with my words. But for example, my words this year are to release, reclaim, and rejoice. And it took me actually sitting in this same hotel that I'm in Austin is where I did the exercise back in December. It took me a couple of hours to go through the process of figuring out what my 3 words were going to be for 2022. And then once I decide on those words, I then move them through a filter of what I call my 7 areas of well-being. Now, this is really more on an individual level, but you can also do it on a team level as well as an organizational level. Not every category may be as germane to the professional as it is to the personal. But once I've chosen those 3 words, I sit down and I ask myself, I say, okay, so how do I want to live those words in my relationships? How do I want to live those words in my career? How do I want to live them in my spiritual life? Whether that's through, I don't have a religious practice, but I still have a spiritual life. So however you define that for you. The 4th category is with regard to my health, and that's both mental and physical. The next category is with my education. So I want to always be learning new things. I never want to say I'm done learning. So I'm always getting a little bit smarter. Then I look at my finances and my income. And then the last category is hobbies or things that give me pleasure that I don't get paid for. And so what I do is I move through those categories and ask. So for example, I'll use release. That's my first word. I'm 48. I'll be 49 in May.
Okay.
So I'm staring down the end of a decade and I'm getting ready to start a new one, right? And so that word release for me came to me. It was like, what do you want to let go of this year? What are you going to leave behind so that going into your 50s, you have released some of the baggage that no longer serves you well? This may seem like a silly example, but it's one that I'm incredibly proud of. Today is day 33 for me that I have not had a grande vanilla latte from Starbucks.
Okay.
And I know that may not sound big, but in terms of like my health and wellness, that's a lot of sugar. It's also a financial investment.
Absolutely.
And it's an investment of time because I have to get in my car and drive to the Starbucks wherever I happen to find myself or hunt one down, whatever city I'm in that week. And so I started 2 days before the new year. That's why I'm on day 33. I got a little tiny, I got like a little jump start, but that's a big deal for me.
Okay.
Like that mattered to me because I wanted to release that habit in this year. I don't want to carry it with me into my next decade. So as you're thinking through that idea, so you choose these 3 words, you then run it through my 7 categories of well-being, you start to see, I think, and experience a different approach to this thing called a new year. It's not resolutions. It's not necessarily goal setting. To me, it's a more powerful exercise to do it from this point of view, this perspective. And once you've gone through those categories, you can then start charting out, okay, if that's how I want to impact each category with these 3 words, then what sorts of mechanisms will I put in place that I'm going to run into on a regular basis every day to remind myself, okay, I've made this commitment that I'm going to do these things so that at the end of the year, I look back on those 3 words and say, I really did create a life that was happening for me. I created this year. I was in control of this year in a way that maybe previously I didn't feel as much as if I was in control.
Okay. Okay. Well, and as you took the 3 words and went through the 7 areas, I mean, to me, chamber person, thinking about members, thinking about business, one, I stop at my chamber mindset to go, those are probably all areas I neglect as a chamber professional. I mean, we just are so giving in the chamber world that we kind of give beyond ourselves. And so we don't think about it personally that affect our organization. But I think also in the aspect of small business owners and our, all of our business professionals that are part of the chamber, there's probably that question mark too of they really need to be thinking about this. They need to care for themselves. So whether or not it's individual versus corporate, the individual does affect the corporate business mindset. So as they think through this, I would say probably the first thing I can hear chamber people saying it just as if it was a choir in this room. And I think they would even say it for their small business of, well, we just don't have time to set all of that. We don't have time to go through. I mean, she said 3 words and then we got to think about 7 people. And so it turns it off. What would you say to somebody that just said, I don't have time for this?
Well, to begin, that kind of conversation for me, the way that I approach it when it comes up is this is not a time management. This is an energy management exercise. And so you need to get better at managing your energy and not your time. And so if you don't have the energy to create a life that's happening for you instead of one that's happening to you, then keep doing what you're doing. And God bless you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Next.
Because and one of the things I've said, I've had this business for 18 years, and I always say I want to work with people who get it, but they don't know how to get there.
Oh,
right? I'm not an evangelist. I am not trying to convert the non-believer. And the reality is that there are people who they have such a pre-programmed habit of all the reasons it can't be that they just immediately fall into that bad habit of, well, that will never work. I was running a team building session last week with a group that I was there. My mission was to spend the day with this group working on the internal team communication. And the goal was for them to leave the room with 3 things that they were going to all commit to work on in the first quarter of 2022. And we reached a moment towards the end of the day when people's energy starts to get low and they're getting tired and and I had to use my mom voice a little bit and say, are you going to commit to this item that we have named? Because if you're not, I'm not putting it on the list. It would be a waste of our time to put something on the list that you're not willing to commit to and find the energy to be able to do this for your team. So if it matters, if it's important enough, you will find a way to do it. And I would tell anyone, as you said that, if they're watching and they're thinking, that kind of sounds like me. I tend to do that. I say, I don't have enough time. I can't do it. I would sit with that for a little bit. Like I would actually sit with it. If I were coaching you, I would sit with it and say, what's happening that you have such a strong resistance to something that could benefit you? Why are you resisting that? What's going on there? And do a little bit of on-the-spot coaching to answer that question. Right. And then I would say, Jason, I would always say, you can't afford not to.
Right. I mean,
you can't afford not to.
Yeah. And I think anybody that absolutely takes a goal or takes a project and they'll tell you that on the flip side. God, what took me so long? But in that aspect of, okay, resistance, non-resistance type aspect. Some people getting going, and I think this is where really want to park for a little bit, is sometimes it's easy to set the goal. Sometimes it's easy to know, as a chamber, we need to hit this many members. Or I remember the very first chamber conference I ever went to. Bob Harris was there, and I was 21. I didn't know what a chamber was, much less what I was supposed to do in leading it. And of course, Bob Harris is talking about business board development. And he said, as a chamber exec, you need to spend 25% of your time in board development. And I thought, I don't even know what board development is. 1, 2, 25% of my time is a lot. But knowing that, what I know now, of that measurability, of that aspect of knowing what happened when I did spend 25% of my time with my board development, and how that relationship was more solidified and how our chamber grew during that period, it was absolutely worth it. And so in that aspect of people going, okay, this is my goal, spending 25% of my time with my board, or growing our membership or our sponsorships in this way. Or if I'm on the small business side of it, going, okay, we've got to stretch, our revenue growth this much, or I'm going to have to rehire 3 or 4 people, or whatever that goal is. Sometimes I think for some, it's easier to set the goal than it is to fulfill the goal.
Well, it is for almost everyone. It's fun to name the goal.
How do you tell them to keep going? So now that if we've set it and now we're getting into February, maybe we haven't been as focused on it. What are some tactical items to keep them going?
Well, you may have noticed, as I was describing the team building session from last week, we were naming some commitments that they will focus on for the first quarter. So Q1, quarter 1, we're going to focus on these 3 commitments. And then I'll come back, and that builds in some accountability, because they know I'm going to roll back into town, and I'm going to walk into the room and say, okay, who kept the commitment? And show me the evidence. One of the things I always tell people is, what evidence have you gathered? And so gather the evidence and show me that you met this commitment that you made. So the first thing I would say is, whether you're calling it a goal or 3 words or however you want to language this, instead of thinking all the way to December, just think first quarter. Okay. So that diminishes some of the feelings of, well, that's so far away, or I'll get to it later. Focus on Q1. And then the other thing you may have heard me say as I was with this team is, we identified 3 commitments. That's it. 3 commitments. And they were measurable. And one of them was so super easy. I'll name it. They made a commitment to one another that when they receive feedback from a team member, whether it's good or bad, their response will be, I received that. And I know that sounds silly, because some of them were uncomfortable with it. They were like, I don't know if I want to say that. And I'm like, I understand it feels a little weird, but we're doing it because it's going to be like a little lever that gets right. Every time we do it, what we're doing is demonstrating to one another, I have made a commitment to you that we are improving communication within our team. So Q1, 3 things we're going to commit to, 3 commitments that we're going to make. If you're anything like me, I have the attention span of a squirrel, and I'm very easily distracted. Right. And so if I'm trying to get to December, I'm going to be distracted 1,000 different ways between now and then. So setting short-term goals, Q1's a good way to package that up, and only focusing on 3 things. Don't try to do 100 things. Choose 3 things. It's the perfect number. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's the perfect number. And so just choose 3 things for right now that you want to focus on. Go back to my Starbucks example. That's a tangible thing. It either happens or it doesn't happen. And it's not huge. I didn't say I'll never have Starbucks again for the rest of my life. The goal that I set for myself is, in January, I will not get a grande vanilla latte at Starbucks. I either do it or I don't. I either hit it or I don't do it, right? And then if I don't hit it, I reassess and I ask myself, is this something I want to continue, or do I want to try something else in February? I would also say, depending, and there's all kinds of different goals or words that we might choose for this exercise. But I would also say to choose something that feels really energizing to you.
Okay.
Like it feels powerful. If you were to imagine yourself accomplishing that, it would feel really good in your body, because that'll keep you motivated and engaged to want to get to whatever the commitment is that you've made or the goal that you've set, because it feels good. And then you've got to have mechanisms in place. So we talk about this as what are the people and what are the processes that you're going to put in your path for the next month, whatever, that you're going to bump into every single day that will remind you. So if you and I ran into each other at a conference, you can now say to me, what? What might you ask me?
How's the Starbucks going?
Because you know, I told you, and now you know. And there's a kind of accountability there that you can check in with me and say, how's that thing going with the no grande vanilla latte? Are you hitting that goal? So I've got people in place, and then I've also got processes in place. And the process that I put in place for me is I just went and bought an espresso. I didn't give up coffee. This is not a give up coffee goal, by the way, because that would be ridiculous. That would be silly. This was a specific 15 years of grande vanilla latte needs to come to an end. So I didn't go cold turkey and give up everything that gives me pleasure in life. But I'm rerouting the practice. It's a new practice that I'm creating for myself.
Okay. I love that about putting things in that make you aware. It's something if it's abstract and if I'm thinking about it, but if there's that reminder, I think that helps as well. And two, as you were talking about this, I just can't help but being in the old chamber executive mindset of, I could tell you all day long how many new members we need for the year.
Right.
It was set. Probably it was set because I factored that in when I made my budget for my board to adopt. And so they want this much increase and all that. So it's collective. Did I break that down by quarter? More than likely not. It was like a chamber I was speaking to this morning in thinking about their planning of when they were going to do things. They have a massive festival in May and June. And so most people, let's say, I'm going to do easy math because I don't have a calculator here. If I was going to increase my membership by 40 for the year, well, that's 10 per quarter. Well, that might not even be realistic because my second quarter is shot planning for a festival. So I might need that to be a little bit more realistic in those plans, that it's not just these general arbitrary numbers in some set.
And sometimes it does feel really arbitrary. And the other thing is I listen to you talk too is who has ownership in that goal? If it's a team effort, did the team get to weigh in on how we set that goal, or was it just foisted upon us and we feel sort of powerless? I'll share with you just in a bigger sense, even beyond this topic of setting goals. I coach from what I call our coaching container. And there's 3 things inside of the container. At any given moment, I want a leader to be able to pause and ask, what is my purpose right now? Where do I feel powerful in my life, and where do I feel powerless? And then how am I maximizing my potential? And so if you can answer those 3 questions in a way that it helps you get to the 40 new members. If you can say, my purpose this month is to focus on getting 10 new members. How do I do that? Like when I feel like the most powerful version of myself who is able to go out and bring in new people to this chamber, what does the powerful version of me look like? What is she doing? How does she walk? How does she talk? Where am I feeling powerless in my ability to do that? And then is there some potential that I have that could be maximized to help me meet this goal that's been set? And that can be another way that people can stay motivated, is through the lens of, okay, if I'm facing down a goal that was given to me, because that happens a lot in organizations. Someone told me that's your goal. Okay, my purpose is to meet this goal. the powerful version of me would do this, this, and this and get there. And I'm maximizing my potential because I'm going to try a couple of things that might be new to me, but I'm going to learn how to do, for example, I'm going to learn how to be a great public speaker. And I'm going to go speak at some conferences. And I think out of that, I could probably attract a handful of new people to our chamber. So it's uncovering ways that you could get to this goal that maybe in the past you haven't tried or pursued before.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and you are absolutely right in the aspect a lot of times, whether we perceive it as forced goals or not, they really are, because it's dictated sometimes just by budget. We don't feel that we're forcing people. Well, the budget said it, but really what were these components to formulate the budget sometimes in that regard? Yeah. Absolutely. Talk a little bit, if you would, because, as I think about goals, the word habit seems to come up a bit in my mindset. I think about that adage, and it was, I think, James Clear's book, Anatomic Habits, that made me think, we always hear this, if you do it for 21 days, it becomes habit. Well, does it really, or were you so focused on the aspect of getting to 21 days that you really weren't looking at lifestyle changes you need to make that a habit? Where for you does goal become habit? Because, or are they interactive or relational? Because, I think if chambers put in what you just said in how do we get a goal for members and all of these components are coming together, I think that's some organizational change that begins to happen. I think if it's small businesses going, this is our goal to grow our company, and we put these things, I think that becomes habit a bit. Am I skewing thought here? What's your thought on those goal and habit relationships?
Well, first I can attest that 21 days does not for a habit make. It takes more time than that. We love the idea of being able to quantify something and say at day 22, it's done. But I still wake up in the morning and think about a grande vanilla latte. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's muscle memory at that point. And so it could take longer to get to this thing. When I hear you talk about habit in the sense of like an organization, what goes through my mind is all the different ways that people fall into the trap of, but this is how we've always done things.
Yes.
And it's those habits that have been these practices that have been repeated over and over and over again to the point that we don't know any other way to conceive of doing this thing, whatever the thing is, right? So what I would suggest is just doing like a little inventory around what are some of our practices that are serving us well and they're getting us the outcomes that we want, and what are practices that are no longer serving us well that we might be willing to let go of. And what I tell people in coaching is if you're going to try something new and it's a bit of a stretch for you, it doesn't come easy. It's probably going to take some energy and some effort to start building a new practice for yourself. I always tell people to use that language of I'm practicing doing this, so that you don't place an expectation that you should have it all figured out by now. It gives you a little bit of latitude, I think, to work within when you say, oh, we're practicing doing this thing that we've not done before. And you're gonna watch it and see if it works. That's where you come back to this idea of gathering the evidence. I wonder, I don't know if it's conveyed in the way that I talk, but there's a kind of playfulness to that approach. It's the willingness to say, we're going to play a little bit and we're going to have fun. I was chatting with my girlfriend, Lisa Hermes, who's the CEO at McKinney Chamber. And I was asking her to weigh in on a presentation that I'm doing this week. And one of the things that she said, we were talking specifically about the impact that COVID has had on the chamber world and the challenges that it brought with it. And she said, but there was a silver lining to that for us. She said, because it allowed us the freedom that we were going to try things we'd never tried before.
Absolutely.
And it was almost a survival tactic at that point. It was like, we just kind of had to throw the rule book out the window and say, what are we willing to try? What new things could we do? What's going to work for us? And she said, now 2 years into it, we've learned things along the way that we'll continue to do because they serve us well.
Mm-hmm.
So it is that willingness to try something new, to practice and see if you get, I know this is grammatically incorrect, but if you get gooder at it, and as you're getting gooder, is it producing the results that you want? And if the answer is yes, then it's something to continue to pursue. If the answer is no, this no longer serves us well, then it's something to release.
Yeah. Well, and would you say, and in kind of the way you said it there, I think somewhat of, as people continue to try to, keep it going, I think sometimes that aspect of being able to quantify it in smaller pieces and experience some of those positive of, well, I'm practicing and it's getting gooder. It's not gooder yet. It keeps me going rather than, here comes January. January's over with. I have a goal of 40 members and I hadn't got a one yet because all this other stuff happened. I think that's somewhat of kind of feeding the soul a bit, wouldn't you?
It can be. Yeah, absolutely. It can be. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that translates into, for many people, as a kind of motivation, a kind of gas that charges the batteries. And that absolutely can be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, as we kind of wrap, I could just do this all day with you. all day. But what would kind of in some parting words? Well, before I say parting words, Jenna Anderson from Pensacola says she loves a vanilla latte too. So go, girl! Yeah. And I know she is sending you some props for sure. But in that aspect, what would you share with everybody? Just kind of in some final thoughts of maybe how they keep gold obtaining alive. How do they share it with others, organizationally or individually?
In terms of the topic, I would tell anyone who's watching live or after the fact, some of the absolute best things that you can do for yourself is to work it into your calendar as an ongoing practice every week, that you are stopping and self-reflecting I ask my coaching clients to self-reflect 10 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week. And I insist that they add it to their calendar so that it is not just I love the word sacrosanct, like what are the things that we hold in such, they're so sacred to us that we have to do it. And I ask my clients to figure out how to make self-reflecting something that is a sacred practice for them. So if you really are into the idea of I want to set goals or I want to choose 3 words, you need to factor in some ongoing self-reflection. I think weekly, it's not enough to just do it monthly. And it doesn't take a long time. It's 10 minutes of your time to just stop. I actually keep an album. I'll start an album at the beginning of the year on my phone. So in my photos. And anytime I'm doing something that I think this really represents one of my words, I move that picture into that album. So at the end of the year, there's something really satisfying about being able to look back through that album. And it could even be as simple as I listened to a podcast that was like spot on for what I'm working on. I take a little screenshot of that podcast. I put it in my folder. I read a book. I take a picture of that book. I put it in my folder. And that way, at the end of the year, I have a living document of pictures that says, Libby, this is the kind of year that you created for yourself. And then the third thing I would say is find someone that you can give them permission to hold you accountable. So they have permission to say to you, how's that thing going with the not getting the grande vanilla latte every day? Or how's that going with those 40 new members that you set this goal to get? But give someone in your life. If you are a new coaching client with me, first question I ask, who has permission to hold you accountable? And you would be gobsmacked by executive leaders, senior leaders, CEOs who will go, nobody, not really. I don't really have anyone that holds me accountable. Well, why? Because you have power. And a lot of people don't hold powerful people accountable. So those would be three things I would say. If you really want to set this year up differently than you have in the past, those would be three ways that you get to December and you go, I did that.
I did that.
I did that. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
We might have to bring you back in December to see how we did it. So
do that.
well, now I have to say, thank you for sharing all of that. I can just imagine what some people are note taking with that. But we always kind of try to end on something fun, and typically I have to think, and I have to, and then this one I literally have put no thought into because it's just going to come so natural. Okay. So in that aspect, I'm going to ask Jolene or Here You Come Again.
Oh, Here You Come Again. It's my favorite Dolly song of all time.
9 to 5 or Still Magnolias?
9 to 5. Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Unlikely Angel or Smoky Mountain Christmas?
Smoky Mountain Christmas.
Are
those the right answers, by the way?
In my opinion, they are so the right answer in them all. Absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and your passion with us. It's just been such a great pleasure for this hour, and I am sure we will see each other soon.
We will. Absolutely.
So, great. So glad to have you. For the rest of y'all, we will look forward to our TRC Talks in February. And of course, as always, feel free to shoot us some questions. If you need to get a hold of Libby, you can get her at bravocc.com. And from there, we will just wish y'all blessings bountiful. Talk to y'all soon.